Welcome to MojoPlays, and today we'll be showing you every major Legend of Zelda game ranked.
Before we begin, we publish new content all week long, so be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos.
For this list, we'll be going over all the main entries in the Legend of Zelda franchise, excluding the spin-offs and remakes. If you take legendary disagreement with our order, or think another game deserves a spot, tell us in the comments. Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link. The second game in the franchise, Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link was a marked departure from its predecessor, featuring RPG elements as well as side-scrolling sections. These new playstyles didn't always gel well and created some abrupt difficulty spikes. However, despite being something of an odd duck in the series, Zelda 2 still introduced many elements that would become series staples, such as the magic meter and more interaction with NPCs. It's not necessarily a bad game, but when compared with the rest of the Zelda games, The Adventure of Link can come across like its most infamous NPC. The Legend of Zelda: Spirit Tracks. The second Zelda game on the DS, and a follow-up to another game we'll be talking about later, Spirit Tracks features some divisive elements. On the one hand, controlling Link and his phantom companion feels fluid and natural, and can lead to some fun puzzles. On the other hand, the overworld being literally on rails proved unpopular with many. Also, the necessity of blowing into the DS microphone to accomplish certain tasks meant that playing with ambient noise nearby could make things more difficult. So, while the art style and gameplay are bright and fun, Spirit Tracks is held back from being as good as it could have been by some design decisions. The Legend of Zelda: Phantom Hourglass. Set prior to Spirit Tracks, Phantom Hourglass features a similar control scheme and art style. However, its world is a more open one, which you traverse via steamboat. It also features a multiplayer option, unlike most mainline Zelda titles. Similar to its successor, Phantom Hourglass also had its share of divisive elements, particularly its stealth sections and the requirement of returning to the same temple multiple times, which some people found repetitive. Even so, Phantom Hourglass feels like a novel experience, unlike most other Zelda games, that's well worth playing. The Legend of Zelda: Oracle of Seasons, and The Legend of Zelda: Oracle of Ages. We usually restrict our entries to one game, but anyone who's played these games know they belong together. Created specifically to be played together, Oracle of Seasons and Oracle of Ages see Link engaging in traditional top-down Zelda gameplay, with the former allowing him to change the environment between the four seasons, and the latter between the past and the present. They have some other differences too, with Ages emphasizing puzzle solving, while Seasons is more action-oriented. There's also a level of connectivity between the two, as owning both games allows for further progression in the other. Both are solid Zelda titles, though not quite as influential as others. The boxing kangaroo is pretty neat though. The Legend of Zelda. The game that started it all, The Legend of Zelda for the NES was a great leap forward for games of the time. Players were dropped into a wide open world to explore, fighting monsters and exploring dungeons across various regions. Also, for the first time in any console game, you could save your progress and then continue where you left off. Talk about revolutionary. There's really not much wrong or divisive about the original game, but since it's the foundation that everything else built upon, it doesn't quite reach the heights later entries would achieve. The Legend of Zelda: Skyward Sword. Chronologically the first game in the Zelda timeline, Skyward Sword took players to an airborne world before Hyrule. Although the gorgeous orchestrated soundtrack, creative world, engaging characters, and story were all enjoyed as much as any other game in the series, the controls have proven divisive. Skyward Sword utilized full motion controls for much of the actions Link performs, and not everyone enjoys playing with them. If they bother you, Skyward Sword may not be your favorite. Still, whether you like it or not, it's an important and entertaining Zelda game overall. The Legend of Zelda: The Minish Cap. This Game Boy Advance entry in the series feels like something of a transitional game. For one thing, it has gameplay and features in common with both 2D and 3D Zelda games, such as the overhead perspective of the former and the weapons being keyed to specific buttons of the latter. The Minish Cap's most distinguishing claim to fame is its titular hat, which Link can use to shrink down to a smaller size. This leads to a lot of fun dungeons and interactions with enemies. Although it's fairly short when compared to others in the series, it's still great for its size. The Legend of Zelda: A Link Between Worlds. Despite being on the 3DS, A Link Between Worlds features a strong 2D element to its gameplay. Link gains the ability in this game to become a two-dimensional painting that can move on walls, opening up a lot of cool puzzle possibilities. A spiritual successor of sorts to A Link to the Past, it also features a dark version of Hyrule, called Lorule, which makes for an intriguing twist. Both a return to form and introducing plenty of new mechanics, A Link Between Worlds is a strong entry in the franchise, but it has some stiff competition ahead. Number 7. The Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening. The finest 2D Zelda game is actually a departure from the usual Zelda experience. Link washes up on a strange island and must discover its strange secrets to escape. While not as large as some other Zelda games, Link's Awakening uses every bit of its island setting to create a charming and memorable experience. It's proven popular enough to receive multiple remakes, with a recent version of the Switch featuring a major graphical upgrade and a dungeon editor. So whether you're playing it on the Switch, the Game Boy, or Link's Awakening DX on the Game Boy Color, it's a dream of a Zelda title we never want to wake up from. Yep. Number 6. The Legend of Zelda: Twilight Princess. Created at the tail end of the GameCube era and the beginning of the Wii's, Twilight Princess was released for both consoles. The game saw Link fighting an invasion of creatures from the sinister Twilight Realm and gaining the ability to turn into a wolf. You're also joined by Midna, who is easily one of the series' best companion characters. While some consider it to be somewhat middle of the road and lacking in the innovation of other 3D Zelda games, Twilight Princess nevertheless has some exceptional dungeons and a memorable aesthetic. It may be grim, but it shines in our book. Number 5. The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. When discussing influential Zelda games, A Link to the Past is right up there. This Super Nintendo game introduced elements that would become series trademarks, including the Master Sword, the hookshot, and multiple versions of the same world. Its gameplay set the standard for top-down Zelda games, and its music is iconic. The game has also been re-released a number of times, on one occasion with a multiplayer game based on it called Four Swords. However, despite frequently being cited as one of the greatest games ever made, A Link to the Past is up against other Zelda games, so it's not the only one that can claim that honor. Number 4. The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker. Set in an oceanic world of small islands, Wind Waker is a cartoony and colorful Zelda game where adventure is just over the horizon. While fans balked at the art style initially, it has aged like fine wine, especially with its HD re-release, which made it look even more gorgeous and fixed some of its pacing issues. For as much as people focus on its aesthetics, Wind Waker also has excellent gameplay, featuring a simple but fun counter system in combat and the ability to control characters besides Link in certain dungeons. Add in the series' signature spectacular music and some wonderful comedic moments, and you've got a course for one of the most fun Zelda games ever made. Number 3. The Legend of Zelda: Majora's Mask. This is my favorite Zelda game. Imagine if Twin Peaks and Groundhog Day got crossed with Zelda, and you'll have something close to Majora's Mask. After traveling to a strange world similar to Hyrule, Link must stop the titular evil mask from causing the moon to crash into the world by repeating the same 3 days. Although its dark and tragic atmosphere won't appeal to everyone, those who love it adore this game, yes I do. Full of numerous engaging side quests, masks that give you special abilities and transformations, and a ton of melancholy music, Majora's Mask can be an acquired taste, but it's one worth experiencing in the original or 3DS remake. Besides, what other Zelda game asks you to protect cows from aliens with a bow and arrow? Number 2. The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild. The most recent Zelda game that isn't a remake or spin-off, Breath of the Wild blew us away and we're still recovering. A massive open-world experience, there's something around every corner with new things to do or discover even after 100 hours spent on the game. The climbing and gliding mechanics bring a new level of mobility and fun to traveling and exploring. Also, it's just fun to play around with the game's physics. Although the shakeup to the Zelda formula wasn't universally well received, with the breakable weapons and somewhat lackluster dungeons being common gripes, those are a small price to pay when there's so much content to enjoy. Number 1. The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. You knew it was coming, you just had to. Ocarina of Time was Zelda's first 3D game, but it did everything so well that essentially every game that followed until Breath of the Wild was built on it to some degree. It's also the game that the whole Zelda timeline revolves around. Ocarina of Time has everything you could want: a fantastic story, a vivid world to adventure in, epic music, fun gameplay, and so much more. It also revolutionized gaming with innovations like its targeting system. What few flaws it does have were ironed out in the 3DS remake. All in all, even if it isn't your favorite, you have to acknowledge its impact, and it's easy to see why fans rate it among the best ever made.
Check out these other great clips from MojoPlays, and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos.